Have you ever wondered if God might be protecting you from a relationship that isn't meant for you? It's a question worth reflecting on, especially in those moments when things fall apart. When someone pulls away, when the connection fades, or when your prayers seem unanswered, are these merely coincidences? Or could they actually be signs of God's loving intervention, shielding you from something that could harm you? If you're reading this, I believe it's not by accident. This message is part of something much bigger than just you or me. It's about recognizing how God actively intervenes in our lives, guiding us toward His perfect plan. As chosen ones, we often find ourselves in situations that don't make sense at first. You might feel heartbroken or confused, asking yourself, why me? But let me reassure you, those unanswered prayers, those closed doors, those red flags, they're not the end of your story. In fact, they may be the beginning of something far greater than you could ever imagine. Through the 4 signs we'll explore together, you'll begin to see how God is not only protecting you but also shaping you, leading you toward a future far more fulfilling than you could have envisioned. So take a moment to reflect. Could this message be God speaking directly to you? Could He be revealing His plan through the situations that seem confusing or painful? If this resonates with you, I encourage you to strengthen your faith. Write "I trust God's plan" in the comments as a declaration of your trust. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. God's hand is upon you, guiding and protecting you every step of the way. Now, let's explore these signs together and uncover the divine purpose behind every closed door. Have you ever met someone who seemed perfect at first, but as time went on, their true nature began to show? Maybe their actions, words, or behavior no longer aligned with the image you had of them. You felt as though a veil was lifted, and what you once thought was perfect turned out to be far from it. In moments like these, it's natural to feel disappointed or heartbroken. But have you ever stopped to consider that this might be God protecting you? When someone reveals an unkind, dishonest, or toxic side early in the relationship, it is not a coincidence. It's one of the ways God intervenes, revealing red flags to His chosen ones, shields that protect you from unnecessary pain and emotional turmoil. Think back on times when you've looked back and realized how a seemingly painful ending was actually a blessing in disguise. What seemed like a setback may have been God's way of guiding you towards something better. Imagine you're walking down a beautiful, peaceful path, but suddenly you hit an obstacle, a barrier that you can't cross. You may feel frustration rising, wondering why the road isn't clear. This is exactly what it feels like when a relationship ends before it fully begins. But for those of us who are chosen, we understand that this isn't bad luck, it's divine intervention. God is protecting you, leading you away from something that's not meant for your life. When someone's true character is revealed early on, it's not punishment, it's protection. God's message to you in these moments is clear: I have better for you. He doesn't want you to settle for anything less than is best for you. Relationships that aren't in alignment with His will for your life can hold you back from experiencing the fullness of His purpose for you. It's easy to question yourself in moments like this. You might wonder if you missed the signs, if you somehow overlooked red flags, or if it's your fault that things didn't work out. But let me reassure you, it's not about blame. This is about clarity. God is showing you who this person truly is, so you don't get entangled in something that would hinder your spiritual growth. The Bible reminds us in Jeremiah 29:11 that God's plans are for our good, not for our harm. Could it be that this early revelation, this moment of clarity, is God's loving hand at work, guiding you away from a situation that would have held you back? Consider the story of David and Saul. Saul appeared to be the perfect king at first, chosen by the people and even anointed by Samuel. But as time went on, Saul's true nature, his insecurities, his disobedience, and his jealousy began to show. God didn't let David get caught up in Saul's toxic grip. Instead, He removed Saul from the throne to make way for David, a man after God's own heart. David could have been devastated when Saul turned against him, but instead he trusted God's plan. God was protecting David from the dangers of being entangled in Saul's unhealthy leadership and guiding him toward his destiny. In the same way, when someone you care about shows you a side of themselves that doesn't align with your values or your soul's purpose, trust that it's God protecting you. Trust that His plan for you is bigger and better than any short-term connection, no matter how it might have seemed at first. Reflect on this. Think about the relationships where God protected you by removing someone from your life, even if it felt painful in the moment. Now look at where you are. You've grown, you've healed, and you've learned. And if you trust God's plan, you'll see that He was always guiding you toward something more aligned with your higher purpose. God's hand is upon you, and His love will never lead you astray. My advice to you when you experience these moments of disappointment or confusion in relationships, take a step back. Trust in God's timing. Even when the path isn't clear or the door seems closed, remember that God's protective love is at work, guiding you toward the life He has planned for you. You don't have to settle for less than is best, and you don't have to understand everything right now. What matters is your faith in God's wisdom, in His timing, and in the life He is preparing for you. Keep reflecting, keep trusting, and know that God is always with you, leading you toward His perfect plan. And remember, every time a door closes, it's because God is protecting you from something better, and He's opening a door that will lead to your greater purpose. Have you ever noticed how, over time, someone's true character begins to emerge, someone you once thought was perfect for you? This is what happened in the story of David and Saul. Initially, Saul seemed to be the right leader for Israel, but as time passed, his true nature was revealed. God had to move David into a position where he could see Saul for who he truly was. And sometimes God does the same for us in relationships. He allows us glimpses into someone's true character early on to prevent us from getting entangled in something harmful. It might be confusing or painful to witness someone's true nature revealed so early, especially when we had hopes or feelings invested. But trust me when I say this is one of God's protective measures for your life. He's giving you the opportunity to see the truth before you get too attached, saving you from unnecessary heartbreak, emotional turmoil, or spiritual harm. There's a saying I hold dear: when someone shows you who they are, believe them. It's a hard truth to swallow, but it's a truth nonetheless. When someone exhibits traits like dishonesty, selfishness, or a lack of integrity early in the relationship, it's not random. It's God stepping in to give you clarity about who they really are. You see, God values your heart far too much to let it be recklessly hurt. He is not about to allow you to give your love to someone who isn't aligned with His purpose for you. You are chosen, and His protection over you is not something He takes lightly. Think about 1 John 5 verse 14 for a moment. If we ask anything according to His will, He hears us. Could it be that God is answering your prayers for protection when He reveals these red flags? When you pray for clarity in a relationship and then witness things fall apart, it might feel like your prayer went unanswered. But perhaps the truth is that the unanswered prayer was the clearest answer. Sometimes God doesn't respond by bringing us the answers we expect or want. Instead, He reveals things that we might not have seen ourselves, protecting us in ways we can't always comprehend at first. It's easy to misinterpret these moments as rejection or failure, but in reality, it's redirection. God is not rejecting you, He's protecting you and guiding you away from something that isn't His best for you. As chosen ones, we have a unique responsibility to align our relationships with God's will. When someone's character reveals selfishness, cruelty, or deceit, it's not a mistake. It's confirmation of what God is trying to shield you from. Don't ignore these moments of clarity. They are opportunities to trust in God's plan, even when it feels inconvenient or painful. This process isn't merely about avoiding a bad relationship. It's about learning to hear God's voice more clearly and growing spiritually in the process. Have you noticed how, when someone reveals an unkind or harmful side, it's like the scales fall from your eyes? It's almost as if the fog lifts, and you can finally see things for what they are. That's God stepping in to protect you, to save you from walking down a path that doesn't reflect His love and purpose for your life. God doesn't want His chosen ones walking into relationships that will damage their hearts, minds, or spirits. He doesn't want us settling for toxic connections, nor does he want us to compromise our values and peace just for the sake of being in a relationship. The beauty of this process is that, while it may be painful in the moment, it is ultimately a blessing. God is protecting you from harm and redirecting you toward a future where His purpose for your life can be fulfilled. He is not withholding something from you, He is preparing something better. So, when you encounter red flags in a relationship, take a moment to pause and ask yourself, could this be God showing me the truth I need to see? Remember that your heart is valuable, and God is safeguarding it. Trust that the process of protection is also one of growth. As you lean into God's wisdom, you'll find that you're becoming more discerning, more spiritually grounded, and more aligned with His plan. Personally, I've learned that the moments when relationships don't work out are often the times when I've been forced to reevaluate my choices. Initially, it felt like a loss, but over time I've come to recognize those failures as divine intervention, God stepping in to redirect my path and save me from heartache that would have come later. So, my advice is this: don't ignore the red flags. When someone shows you who they truly are, take it as a gift from God, not a setback. It's His way of protecting you, guiding you, and ultimately helping you to align with the future He has for you. Trust His timing, trust His protection, and trust that the right person for you will reflect His love and purpose, without the need for manipulation, deception, or hidden motives. In conclusion, whenever relationships seem to fall apart, or when you see a side of someone that makes you uncomfortable, pause and reflect. Could this be God's hand at work? If it is, trust that His intervention is ultimately for your good. His plans for your life are always greater than what you can see right now. His redirection is a gift, not a punishment, and it's leading you towards something far more beautiful than you could ever imagine. Trust in His protection, trust in His wisdom, and trust in His divine timing. Your heart is too precious to be left in the hands of anyone who doesn't align with His love and purpose. When someone reveals their true nature early on, it's not just a coincidence, it's God's gift of clarity. It's His way of protecting you, guiding you away from potential heartache and towards spiritual growth and fulfillment. These moments of early revelation, where you see red flags or witness a side of someone you hadn't noticed before, may initially feel like doors slamming shut, but I believe they are actually divine guardrails. Think of them as spiritual stop signs, guiding you to take a different path, the one that leads to God's perfect will for your life. God knows the deepest desires of your heart, and He's not going to let you waste time on a relationship or person that isn't meant for you. When a red flag appears, don't second guess it. See it for what it is, a sign that God is protecting you. Even when it feels like things are falling apart, trust that they are falling into place according to God's plan. Everything happens for a reason, and this process of discerning God's signs is all part of your growth as one of His chosen ones. There's something deeply beautiful about the way God works through these moments. Every closed door, every red flag, and every early revelation of someone's true character is leading you closer to God's perfect will for your life. It's not about focusing on what didn't work out, but about trusting that God has something better ahead. His plan for you is always greater than your own, even when it's hard to understand in the moment. As challenging as it may be, this process of learning to discern and trust God's intervention is essential to your spiritual growth. It's a reminder that God is not just working in your life through direct experiences, but also through the people around you, family, friends, and loved ones. Have you ever had a loved one express concerns about someone you were dating? Initially, you might have brushed it off, thinking they didn't understand or were being too protective. But here's the truth: sometimes God speaks through the people closest to us. The people who know you best, who have seen you at your lowest and your highest, can often be the vessels through which God provides clarity. If a friend or family member raises concerns about a relationship, it's not something to take lightly. Their intuition about the situation could be more accurate than you realize. Especially when multiple people express similar doubts, it's worth taking a pause to reconsider and pray for clarity. Could God be using them as a messenger to protect you from a relationship that isn't in alignment with His plan? I can think of a story from someone I know who had a best friend voice concerns about a person they were seeing. At first, they dismissed their friend's opinion, thinking it was just a misunderstanding. However, as time went on, the very traits their friend had pointed out, dishonesty, manipulation, and a lack of respect, began to surface. That's when the truth hit. God had been using their friend as a vessel to reveal what was hidden. What started as an uncomfortable warning turned into a profound realization. This wasn't a random concern, it was divine intervention. If you've experienced something similar, I want to encourage you to pay attention to the people God has placed in your life. Listen to their advice, especially when they express doubts about a relationship. The Bible teaches us in Proverbs 11 verse 14 that where there is no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors there is safety. This verse highlights the importance of seeking wisdom from others. It's not a weakness to seek advice or listen to the concerns of those who care about you. It's a strength. It's protection. When you're emotionally invested in someone, it's easy to become blinded to red flags, especially when you want the relationship to work. But God's voice often comes through the wisdom of others, those who are emotionally detached from the situation, but have your best interest at heart. Trust that God is using them to steer you in the right direction. In my own life, I've learned that God doesn't always speak to us in dramatic ways. Sometimes He uses the voices of friends and family to confirm what we're already sensing in our hearts. These are not random warnings, they are part of God's divine plan. I've seen this time and again. When I've ignored the advice of loved ones, I've regretted it. But when I've taken their concerns seriously, I've seen God's protection unfold in amazing ways. So my advice to you is this: when someone close to you expresses concern about a relationship, listen. It may feel uncomfortable, but it's a gift from God. Trust that He is revealing things you may not be able to see yourself. And when red flags appear, don't brush them off as insignificant. See them as God's way of shielding you from what's not meant for you. Trust in His wisdom, trust in the people He's placed in your life, and trust that He's leading you towards something far greater than you could imagine. In the end, the most loving thing God can do is protect you from relationships that aren't aligned with His will for your life. When He opens your eyes to the truth early on, it's not to hurt you, it's to guide you toward healing, growth, and ultimately peace. You are chosen, and His hand is over your life. Trust in that guidance, even when it's not what you expected. It's all part of God's perfect plan for your life. The saying, "In the multitude of counselors there is safety," is not only a wise principle for life, but especially vital when it comes to relationships. When the people you trust and love express concerns about someone you're dating or involved with, it's easy to brush it off as them overstepping or misunderstanding your situation. However, it's crucial to recognize that these voices are often God's way of protecting you. Their concerns are not about control, they are about love and guidance, and it's essential to see these moments not as inconveniences, but as divine interventions. God often speaks to us through the people closest to us. These individuals, family, friends, mentors, may see things that we can't. They aren't as emotionally invested in the relationship and can therefore offer a clearer perspective. It might be hard to hear, but God could be shielding you from something you can't yet see. Their insight might be the very answer to the prayer you've been asking, even if it's not the answer you hoped for. One of the hardest aspects of accepting advice from loved ones is setting aside our own pride. It's natural to think, they just don't get it, or they don't know this person the way I do, but this is where humility becomes key. When people who care about you raise concerns, especially if they do so repeatedly, it's worth considering that God is speaking through them. Their perspective might be the warning you've been asking for, even if it's not what you want to hear. Let's face it, those red flags that others point out often don't look like red flags at first. At the beginning of a relationship, we might see someone's little quirks, habits, or behaviors as something quirky or misunderstood. But over time, these same traits can grow into larger issues that can't be ignored. That's why God places people in our lives who can see what we might miss. Our family and friends often have a broader, clearer vision, free from the emotions and attachments we have in the relationship. They can spot potential problems long before we do. Have you ever thought of these concerns from your loved ones as God's protection rather than interference? It's easy to become defensive, but consider that God is using them to protect you from walking down a path that could harm your spiritual growth. Remember the example of Jesus and his disciples. He surrounded himself with people who not only supported him but also challenged him when needed. God places these kinds of people in our lives too. Our family, friends, and mentors are there not just to celebrate our victories but to guide us away from situations that could distract us from his purpose. One of the most humbling aspects of being chosen is recognizing that we don't always see the full picture. It's a tough pill to swallow, but we must accept that God has a higher view of our lives. He sees what we cannot, and he often uses the voices of others to help us see things more clearly. The truth is, we can't always rely on our own judgment, especially when emotions are involved. When those close to us express doubts about someone in our life, it's a sign that we need to take a step back. We should take a moment to listen, reflect, and most importantly, pray. Seek God's will and ask him for confirmation. When concerns arise from those around you, it's not an attack on your judgment, it's an invitation to go deeper in your spiritual practice. Take it as an opportunity to seek God's voice more clearly. It could very well be the intervention you've been needing, even if it comes through the people you least expect. Here's my personal advice: don't rush to dismiss the advice of those who love and care for you. Instead of reacting defensively, pause and take the time to pray. Ask for clarity. Open your heart to receive God's guidance, whether it comes through a friend, family member, or mentor. Trust in God's protection, knowing that when he closes a door, he is guiding you to something better. It might not be easy, and it may not be comfortable, but remember God's plans for you are always for your good. Jeremiah 29 verse 11. So next time someone you trust raises concerns about someone in your life, take a moment to listen, reflect, and ask for God's guidance. Trust that he sees the full picture and that his intervention, though it may feel difficult, is always a sign of his love and protection over your life. Have you ever noticed how the concerns of your loved ones often echo your own quiet doubts? You know, those small, nagging worries that you push aside because you really want things to work out. It's as if God is amplifying those inner nudges through the people who love you most. This isn't about creating conflict or stirring up unnecessary tension, it's about guiding you back to him. When your family or friends voice concerns, it could be a divine signal to slow down, reflect, and realign your life with God's greater purpose. The beautiful thing about listening to those who love you is that it strengthens both your faith and your relationships. Trusting that God speaks through the people who care about you brings you closer not just to them but also to him. Their concerns are not meant to tear you down, but to lift you up and protect your heart. They are guardians of your peace, speaking to you from a place of love, even if their words challenge you. But have you ever considered how God might shield you even when someone seems genuinely interested in you but doesn't follow through? You know that painful feeling when someone shows interest in you and then, without warning, shifts their attention to someone else. It stings, doesn't it? It can feel like rejection, and it's easy to take it personally. But what if I told you that this could actually be God protecting you? Sometimes when someone leads you on but doesn't follow through, it's a divine signal to guard your heart. God doesn't want you to waste time or energy on relationships that don't align with his plans for your life. I know it can feel like a blow to your self-esteem when someone suddenly loses interest or chooses someone else. You might wonder, what did I do wrong? But what if it wasn't about you at all? What if God allowed this to happen because he's protecting you from something worse down the road? Being led on can sting, and it's hard to see in the moment, but often it's a form of divine protection. It's God saying, "This is not the person I have chosen for you. It may hurt now, but as time passes, you'll likely see that it was a blessing in disguise." I've heard many stories of people praying for a relationship to work out, only to watch it fall apart. At the time, it feels like their prayers weren't answered, but I believe that God was answering them, just not in the way they expected. Sometimes, when someone moves on or loses interest, it's actually a sign that they weren't part of God's plan for you. Think of it as redirection, not rejection. You might feel lost in the moment, but trust that God will always lead you to a path that brings growth and fulfillment. Even if the journey involves some tears, it's part of His greater plan. It reminds me of a passage in Exodus 14, verse 14, "The Lord will fight for you, you need only to be still." When someone leads you on and then leaves, it might feel like a battle you're losing. But in reality, God is fighting for you. He's clearing your path of distractions, guiding you away from relationships that aren't part of your destiny. It's not a setback, it's a setup for something better. God is removing what doesn't serve you so He can bring the right person into your life at the right time. A personal example. I once had a friend who was involved in a relationship that seemed perfect at first. The guy seemed genuinely interested, but over time his actions didn't align with his words. After a few weeks of mixed signals, he suddenly started distancing himself and eventually shifted his attention to someone else. It was painful for her, and she took it personally. But looking back, we both realized that God was protecting her heart. She had been praying for clarity in that relationship, and when it fell apart, we saw it as God's answer. It was painful, but it allowed her to step away from something that would have been emotionally draining.